word, that you will help us to have open hearts, we can be guided by your word, and that we can consider our own ways and how we live. We can be pleasing to you. And God, we long for the day that this world is ended and we are with you eternally. And God, we pray all this in the name of Jesus Christ, who died for us. Amen. Okay, so we're going to be talking about Moses again. I bet you didn't know that. So we've been talking a little bit last week, and I know you got the paper from last week. It won't really help you some when we get to the 10 plagues, but we're still considering two subjects specifically, more on the providence of God, and we're looking at it right now, providence and fellowship. I know we talked about fellowship before we got started on a whole class in fellowship, but Moses has a special relationship with God. The people of Israel, their relationship with God is chosen for a purpose. They do bring Christ in the end to us and to the world, and God has been with them and strengthens them throughout. There's a promise made to Abraham and his descendants. But we saw last week that dealing with Moses' life, hundreds of years have passed, and things change. They are in servitude, slavery, some being beaten and mistreated in horrible ways, and it doesn't seem it gets worse as we go along here. Moses is called. Last week we stopped with Moses being called out of the burning bush. I think it's such an interesting place of calling and purpose, and the relationship that you're going to see grows with Moses. Moses is able. It says, "Take off your sandals. You are on holy ground." That means Moses is treading on a place where not everybody gets to tread. There's a special relationship he builds with him, and again with the children of Israel, and you'll see how that goes as well. But we kind of looked at how he provided for Moses. And I want to see also how he provided not only for Moses, we're going to see that here, but for Israel itself as well. Sometimes the providence of God doesn't work in the same way we expect it. I'm thankful. I just prayed the prayer that I'm thankful for what we're blessed with in this country. But always, everything that we're blessed with may not always be to our best benefit. And there's a lot of ungrateful people in our country. And I think about sometimes when I'm at the point where I get ready to complain and think about the challenges all around the world that face way different circumstances than I've ever faced. And mine seems so small. I'm not hiding in a bunker waiting for missiles to hit. I'm not worried about my government trying to kill me. I'm not worried about a lot of the challenges, starving to death. I'm pretty much eating every day. There's a lot of things. I've got a roof over my head, and the Lord has blessed me, and yet there are people around the world that do not have those things. And so I think, though, sometimes the trials, you're going to see this in Moses, the things that you didn't expect how God will work, God works in mysterious ways. Sometimes trials actually brings about the purpose of God. Hardships can bring about the purpose of God. And we find that in this next passage. Now, we're going to start at chapter 4. If you got your books, Exodus chapter 4. I want you to see a little bit here of the relationship Moses has already started, because what Moses does is kind of, to me, similar. Abraham has his own circumstances in his relationship where he's willing to bargain with God. Moses actually argues almost with God, or refuses, so he gives excuses. I don't know, probably we do this in our mind more than we think we do. But I mean, he out and out just says, I want to do it. So I want you to see the relationship, and I want you to see specifically, Moses is a flawed person. He's a great godly man, but how God interacts with Moses, even in his flaws. Do you think God gets irritated with mankind sometimes? I would say a whole lot of times. Often probably in my own life. And yet, Moses just plain out argues. He gets irritated, and yet somehow still preserves us. Chapter 4, we'll be starting at verse 1. Moses said, what if they will not believe me? Listen to what I say. Remember, he's called them to go to Egypt. The Lord has not appeared, and said that the Lord has not appeared to you. The Lord said to him, what is that in your hand? And he said, a staff. And he said, throw it on the ground. He threw it on the ground, and it turned into a serpent, a snake here. And Moses fled from it. And the Lord said to Moses, reach out with your hand and grasp by the tail. So he reached out with his hand, and he grasped it, and it turned into a staff in his hand. So that they may believe that the Lord, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has appeared to you. Now, I want to stop just and focus on the Lord God has appeared to you. Moses has been gone for a long time. But there's a special relationship here. He's giving him the tools needed. So keep going here. The Lord furthermore had said to him, now put your hand inside the fold of your robe. He put his hand inside the fold. He took it out. Behold, his hands was leprous like snow. He said, put your hand inside the fold of your robe again. He put his hand in the fold again, and when he took it out of the fold, it was restored like the rest of his flesh. So if they will not believe you nor pay attention to the evidence of the first sign, they may believe the evidence of the last sign. But if they will not believe even these two signs nor pay attention to what you say, you will take some water from the Nile and pour it on the dry ground. And the water which you take from the Nile will turn into blood on the dry ground. And Moses said to the Lord, please, Lord, I have never been eloquent, neither recently nor in time past, nor since you have spoken to your servant. For I am slow of speech, slow of tongue. The Lord said to him, who has made the human mouth? And who has made anyone unable to speak or deaf, or able to see, or blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now then go, and I myself will be with your mouth and instruct you in what you are to say. He said, please, Lord, now send a message by whomever you will. I think that last one's just like, not me.
That's not a good translation. Mine says, oh Lord, please send someone else to do it.
That's pretty much what he's saying. Okay, and it straightforward, pick somebody else, not me. Okay. I think about this, I think about the excuses, and ultimately, even in this case, the anger of the Lord said burn against Moses, but he says, this is your brother Aaron, I give to him, he's your mouthpiece, go, he's going to talk for you, etc. I think about this though, and look, I think about our own self sometimes and how we like to sometimes make the same excuses, but in spite of Moses' lack of desire, obviously he don't want to go, and the excuses he makes, how does God provide for Moses? And I want you to think about the providential care of what God has given him. So he's going to Egypt. How is he providing for him? What is his excuse? Okay, I'm gonna go in there. What's his excuse first?
They're not gonna believe.
They're not gonna believe me. I mean, they hadn't seen me in how long? How they know I'm from you?
He says he can't talk well.
Okay, he's giving an excuse he can't talk well. Okay, he's giving an excuse they won't believe me. How does God help in providing what's needed?
He's already got Aaron on the way.
Okay, so
I think he knew he was going to do it.
So one of the ways, the eloquent speech, Aaron is there.
The staff.
Okay, what about the staff? The staff in itself is just a staff, but in the hand of Moses or Aaron, sometimes Aaron also had a staff. In the hand of them, through God's power, I won't say they had the power themselves, and they wouldn't claimed it either. Pretty powerful thing. What can the staff do? I mean, turn to a snake, they can pick it back up, right? The hand and the flesh coming out. What are these all for? He tells you what they're for.
They're signs.
Okay, the excuse is they're not going to believe me, and I want you to see how God gives him the tools that he needs. Okay, so he's not probably an eloquent speaker. He may not have been. I don't know. And they might have questioned the fact, where did you come from and why should we believe you? God gave him not one sign, though. How many did he give him? 3. If they don't believe you because you do this, then they'll hopefully you do this one, they'll believe that. And if they don't believe that one, then he gave them 3 signs. And who else did he gave Aaron? We talked about Aaron. Okay, just be. He really gives him everything he needs, does he not? So I want you to see the picture of God's care for Moses. Is Moses going into a dangerous situation? Absolutely. If God tells you he's going to take care of you and provide, he's going to provide. And I think that's throughout the scriptures, not just with Moses. God gives the ability and the tools that we need to do these things. But what excuses do we make? Think about the same thing for us. What kind of excuses do we make for not to say doing whatever God has called us to do? Yes.
The same, I think, going back to chapter 3, I like the second one, I think is kind of humorous, but when Moses said to God, who am I to go? You know, I can't, it's not me. Then the second question was, well, what do I say if they say, what's your name? You know, you're going to tell people that God spoke to you. Okay, what's his name? And then God says, I am who I am. But he was, right from the get-go, he didn't want to go. His mind was already coming up with, what do I do if, what if I do if? And God's answered every question. And he's going to be with them.
Does that relate any? For sometimes some people, they don't want to go. Okay, that's really what it comes down to here. But there's reasons why Moses don't want to go. What will it mean for him to go? Just think about good reasons as a human, okay?
Fear. I think in his case it could mean death, because he's already, and stuff like that. He feels like he's going to go there. They're going to shun him, everything like that.
He left in an unfavorable position.
Yeah.
Who likes to go to the unfavorable positions, okay? Any of us, like, you might be better, how many times we've said this in our mind, you may be better at talking with that person than me because of the relationship. You may be better at doing that job. I think, really, if you look at it from a human standpoint, Moses is saying somebody else would be better at this, okay? So, yeah, it's going to be a sacrifice, and possibly, he could put himself in danger. What else? What kind of other things? When we look from Moses' standpoint, what's he been doing for 40 years?
He's been by himself.
He's married.
Well, not by himself, but he's been
Yeah.
taking care
So
of the sheep.
he's been taking care of sheep. Look, how many of us want to just drop our career to go do some kind of traveling somewhere else? Even if God says this is a good opportunity, like, you do know this is what I do, right? I wake up and provide for the sheep. He's got wife and kids. He ends up with wife and kids. What does it mean for them? They do not go with him. They only go part of the way. They ultimately have to go back. Okay, they don't stay with him. So, I want from a human standpoint, I can kind of look at Moses and say, okay, this doesn't look like a favorable position. Even your own people didn't like you when you left. Okay, and by the way, it doesn't seem to get better, because when he does go and the Pharaoh rejects him, Pharaoh actually makes all the labor harder on the Israelites. And they're like, why'd you even show up? Like, you just messed us all up by showing up. So I told you, God, I shouldn't be here, kind of idea. Like, I'm the wrong person for this job. Yeah.
Well, he killed the Egyptian. He's not welcome by,
Not by either party, all right?
party.
But other than maybe Aaron, because he's his brother. But there's a lot of mentality, and I want you to think about us, and our excuses are not always poor excuses on it. I don't really think every excuse Moses had was incorrect, perfect. He just didn't want to do it. His whole life would change, and it does change. Ultimately, think about his life from here on out is never anywhere close to the life he had. It's a whole different life. That'd be hard for us to do it. So we can give excuses. It may be I'm not an eloquent speaker. I don't know what to tell somebody when I talk to them. We've all said that. I don't know what I would say in this case. Or in cases, they're not going to, even if I try to show them, they're not going to listen. Have we ever said that? Like, I'd talk to my family member, my friends or whatever, but they don't want to hear it. Isn't that exactly what Moses just said? They're not going to believe it came from you. Okay, they're not really, again, I understand they're all, technically Moses has reasonings, okay? He has his reasonings. When we're called to do great things, and all of us are not called for the same person, not all of us are Moses, but we're all called to work for the kingdom of God and to help him. And so the question is not, excuses here, the question is not what we're lacking, but what we have to help with, what we do are given. And God provides, here again, for the speaking. God provides for the proof. God provides. He won't do it miraculously the same way for us, but He does give us the tools that we need when we're dealing with these things. So, I'm thinking about that and how God continues to help us, and He will continue. It's not just now. He may, in the future, He will continue to bless the church. He will continue to bless the works that we do. But a lot of times our excuses are just like his. We try to reason ourselves out of this. Now look at chapter 5 and 6 a little bit. I'm not going to read chapter 5, but I want you to understand. We said Pharaoh goes in there. It's complete rejection. Pharaoh says, basically, laughs off. By the way, he doesn't get killed when he goes in there, which is in itself, this is Pharaoh. There is a transition, but they know who he is. And they don't start out with, take him, put him in prison and kill him, okay? He's been gone a long time. The anger, the frustration's worn off. He comes in with a conversation, and he is able to go and actually speak to Pharaoh because who is he? He grew up in the kingdom. I don't know, there's a lot of questions that who this person was, this Pharaoh, and how he could have been connected. Doesn't matter here, but he was connected to the family. So this is family talking to family in some way. This is conversations of Pharaoh's talking to someone who they knew real well. But this complete rejection to let the people go, and I think it's interesting when we come to chapter 6, because it does make the work harder on people. The people do basically tell Moses, why did you do this? But some of this works in Pharaoh's heart's hardened. How can Pharaoh, do you think God knew that Pharaoh would reject them? Oh, obviously he did. In fact, he tells Moses, ultimately, he's going to reject you. Now, what would Moses have liked to do when he went in there? Think about this. How is his plan? Think about making your own plan. You're writing down a plan of how this is going to work. I'm sure Moses had a little plan. Okay, him and Aaron, they sit down, they're making a plan out what they're going to say. Okay, and God speaks to him, okay, and tells him, but he goes in there, he's got this plan. What is the outcome he's looking for?
Yes, I'll let the people know.
Sure, even if it's a little like, at first, like,
Little
look,
festival.
this is the easiest way would be nice, wouldn't it? Don't we like simple measures, things to go well? Okay, we don't really want the not going to happen. Not only is it not going to happen, I'm going to do that much worse. Okay, and I'm sure at this point Moses is like, and the people reject him. And if you read, I'm not going to read like I said, chapter 5, but they basically say, Moses, basically you and Aaron just made us stinky in the sight of the Egyptians. Thank you, but no thank you. Okay, please leave us alone. Let us do our work. Okay. Look at chapter 7 though, and I want you to kind of see some of this stuff, how it works. Let me see here. No, look at chapter 6. Go back to chapter 6. I want to read one section. First part of chapter 6. Now the Lord said to Moses, now you shall see what I will do to Pharaoh. For under compulsion he will let them go, and under compulsion he will drive them out of the land. God spoke further to Moses and said to him, I am the Lord. I appeared to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, as God Almighty, but by my name, Jehovah, here's the name you give, or Yahweh, I did not make myself known to them. I also established my covenant with them to give them the land of Canaan, the land in which they lived as strangers. Furthermore, I have heard the groanings of the sons of Israel, because the Egyptians are holding them in bondage, and I have remembered my covenant. Okay, and I want you to think about what he just said. Now, when we think about fellowship and the relationship, what kind of relationship does he have with Israel? Israel's been in slavery, and one part of it's their own faults. Okay, they do kind of interact with the idolatrous gods. They haven't lived godly lives. But what does God say about them? About the Israelites? How does he feel about them? I want you to notice a couple things here.
He still remembers the covenant.
First of all, the word covenant comes up here. What is a covenant? We've looked at it before. It's more than just a promise. It's a binding by God. Okay, it's beyond a promise, and it's kept. If God makes a covenant, He keeps His covenant. So the covenant really was Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Okay, that's why He keeps bringing their names up. And to their descendants. God never forgot His covenant. Okay, He always knew what He promised. But the people were rejecting Him for a while. At this point, it's not that He forgot, it's that He's going to do something about it. Time passes. Do we like time to pass when we're trying to make a plan work? I mean, think about that. Sometimes we have something we're going to do within the month, and then before long it's 6 months and didn't get done, and you think, how did those 6 months just go away? And we are, especially if you're doing something that you know it needs. This is something that the Israelites have been waiting for. God has His own timing. But more than just the covenant, I want you to understand what He said at the end. I have heard their weepings or their groanings, okay? When people are going through, you may ask the question, why did they have to go through the struggles in the first place? That's a good question to ask, and really the biblical account gives us very little information from Joseph all the way to, but there are some places that give you the idea there are some things they didn't do right. Things change over generations. But in struggles, God can actually use for His favor. He hears the groaning. Does God still hear the weepings and groanings of people all around the world today? I 100% believe it. I do not know why there's wars overseas. I do not know why we have issues. Even in our own country, we might be at war, but in every comment section of your Facebook, if there's a post that's out there, somebody's arguing with somebody else. It can be sports related, okay? It can be, I was reading something today about something with pay, a gap in pay, somebody didn't make as much as somebody else, okay? It can be, race related sometimes, and that. And I read one, they were like knocking on certain parts of the country, like area-wide. We're all in the same country, but we're going to be really hateful to one section of the country. Like, there are people in that section that are good people too. And the reality is, all these struggles we face in the world, you may ask, why in the world do we have that much problem? Because humans are humans. But God hears Israel's groanings. Who's groaning? Who are they groaning to?
To God.
Obviously, something has changed within them that they know there has to be something. They're obviously pleading to God. He says, I remember them. They're obviously groaning. I hear their cries. I hear their weepings. And I'm about to do something about it. Now go to chapter 7. I told you we're going to go there. And then the Lord said to Moses, I made you as God to Pharaoh. I want you to think that's really an interesting comment. I want you to see the special relationship Moses had. I don't know, the Bible doesn't tell you Moses was anywhere close to perfect. I mean, we just talked about his excuses he made. I have made you as God to Pharaoh. You represent God. That's a special kind of relationship, don't you think? You symbolize God, and your brother Aaron shall be your prophet, because prophets speak for God. Okay? And by the way, we're going to get to this in the 10th plague. Do you realize they believed Pharaoh to be idolized almost like a god? If you became the Pharaoh, you had special abilities, special powers that God would rain down. You were almost like God. So they saw that. So when he says this, I'm going to make you like God, Pharaoh actually, seeing some of the things that happened, to him, it would be a symbol of being a god. They believed in many gods, right? So, and I make your brother Aaron to be a prophet. As for you, you shall speak all that I command you. Your brother Aaron shall speak to Pharaoh that he let the sons of Israel go out of his hand. Listen to this. I will harden Pharaoh's heart. Now, I'm not getting into what that means because I don't, there's a lot in that conversation of how he does that. But he knows Pharaoh. He knows he's not going to let him go. So that I may multiply my signs and my wonders in the land of Egypt. Now, I want you to pay attention to God providentially using a really some horrible things about to happen to these people. And he's going to use it. He's going to use troubles for a purpose. But this is what he says. He says that that I may multiply my signs and my wonders in the land of Egypt. When Pharaoh does not listen to you, I will lay my hand on Egypt and bring out my armies, my people, the sons of Israel from the land of Egypt by great judgments. Then, listen to this, then the Egyptians shall know that I am Jehovah, or God, basically. And when I extend my hand over Egypt and bring out the sons of Israel from their midst. And so Moses and Aaron did this as the Lord commanded. And he goes on to talk about there. So, what is his purpose of what he's about to do? You cannot miss the purpose behind it. This is going to be something else. And by the way, some of the plagues don't just hit the Egyptians, does it? He in the middle changes that. At the beginning, the plagues hit all of them. Hebrews as well. It affects the righteous with the unrighteous. Does that sound fair? No, but God's going to provide for them in the end. Okay, you're going to see how God works here. Yes.
I think you're right that in the first part, the plagues affect all of them, and then later it's just the Egyptians until you get to the Passover. But the thing is, well, I guess all the plagues to some degree affect all of them. But the thing was, at that point, the Hebrews weren't believing Moses either. So that's what he just said. Okay, you're going to be like a God to me, or to Pharaoh and to Aaron. Aaron's going to speak to him, and I don't think he's saying, I'll harden his heart like, ooh, your heart's hardened. But more like that's what Pharaoh's response is going to be. His heart's going to be hardened, and because of that, I'm going to do the miracles that's going to convince the people, and it's going to convince everybody who is going to be saved.
Do you think when Moses went in here, he knew that was the plan? I don't really think Moses knew what the plan was. Okay, things are going to get worse before they get better. That's the reality, even for the Hebrews. But what is the purpose of that? Now I want you to see that things that don't work in our plans can be God's plan. Somebody says, what happens if our country is taken over by the Chinese, okay, or whatever? What happens if this happens? We always have a what happens if something else happens. You know what? At that point, again, it's in the hands of God. I guess I'll learn to speak Chinese, right? I don't know what else you can say. God can use terrible situations for a purpose, but here he says, I'm going to prove that there is a God different than the gods they have. I'm going to prove and let not just the Hebrews, which you're right, okay, the people who should have followed God, now they are groaning, so there's kind of a split probably that might give you the idea there may be a split even among the Hebrews. Some of them are groaning for God, okay, he comes in to save them. Some of them may still be like, and we do see idolatry follow them even on in their journey. So some of them are not quite to that degree. But I'm going to show that there's a God. And I'm going to also show who else? The Egyptians. Do they believe in Jehovah God? They believe in
A lot of
their gods, okay? And that their gods are more powerful and capable than any God that the Jews would worship. I'm going to show you who God really is. And even the outsiders are going to notice. How does the rejection by Pharaoh, okay, work into God's plan? How does this work into his plan?
The whole world will know when this is all said and done who God is and what kind of power he has. I mean, if you were going to do a press release and advertise who God is, he surely did it.
But when they get to Canaan land, and it's years, over 40 years, right, before he gets to Canaan. You know, one of the questions about Canaan, we have heard what they did in Egypt. The Canaanites knew exactly what happened. Their trade and everything had changed. Everybody in the world knew something major happened in Egypt, and they had the conversation. Okay, but think about this: the destruction of the Egyptians. Now, I know this is also a conversation we could have another time, but why God destroys evil nations. The people were not following godly ways. I mean, just the fact that they were taking these people and basically torturing them in ways shows what kind of troubles they have. But you're going to find that even the Egyptians, the world, as you would say it, in our day and time, it'd be those who are non-Christians, actually changed their view at the end. Some of them, at the end, actually believe in Jehovah God. They actually do believe, even outsiders. And so sometimes terrible things can turn people toward something good. But he destroys the evil Egyptians. Okay. In fact, people will say, I want to give this conversation. People say that Moses is not in the history of any other documents. People will talk about that. Say you can't find it in other than the Bible. But I will tell you what you can find. Egypt was a strong power in this time. We can actually read that they were. And all of a sudden, for a long time, they became a very weak nation. Just all of a sudden. It's like if you look at the ancient history, they just dropped off all of a sudden. And their records, all of a sudden they're not powerful. All of a sudden they're not considered. All of a sudden they're not the king of the trade anymore. And it happens right at the time we're talking about here. So the only explanation is what we're about to get into in this passage. Look, if I take your crops out, I take your animals out, I take all your firstborn and your army out, you know what's going to happen? I'm just saying, it's going to be bad for you, okay? You're not going to be what you once were. And that's pretty much what he does to them, okay, in these plagues. So this is reliable information. But I think about, again, some of the things that this crying out does. Sometimes hardships lead to a closer relationship with God. How about us? Can hardships lead to a closer relationship with God for us? What kind of hardships can teach us? Think about this for a minute. Okay, you lose a loved one. I can tell you this. Death, they say, makes people think about their own life and how they're living it. In fact, people who have just lost a loved one are more susceptible to the teaching of Christ's word than any other time. Why? Because they know that life is going to end, and they know theirs will one day too. Okay? Not a very good situation at the moment, but it leads to something to be good. But look, financial troubles can teach you contentment. I just talked to a guy that we're in homeschool with. He says, he's got 6 kids, okay? And he started a new business and some other things, but he said in the last year and a half, we've lived off of $250 a week. And he said, and not only do they have kids, they have animals, which I can't imagine how we're talking llamas and goats and everything. He goes, I wouldn't trade it for anything. He said, I learned a lot about the things you don't need and what you do need. I learned a lot about just putting your hope in God and moving forward. Because when you don't got anything, and you're trying to take care of all the things you got to, look, how do you live that way, right? How can you live that way? And he said, I learned what I don't need. Financial hardships teach you something good, okay? When we go through persecutions, you know when the church grows the most? During persecutions. It teaches you about your faith, whether or not you have the courage. It does something within you. Every hardship can lead to something good, even if at the moment it seems bad. Yes, Rick?
I was just saying, just going back to 9/11, that brought our country closer together. People started attending church again. I mean, there's something, you don't appreciate the sunny days without the stormy days. You don't appreciate what you have until something's taken away from you. And then unfortunately, there's a lot of people in this country that don't have disappointments where they don't need they don't feel the need for God. Like I said, when my first child was born and the doctor said she may never walk or talk, I grew up in the church having some doubts if there was a God. on that night, I knew there was a God, because I knew I wasn't just praying to hope. I knew there was a God. And it's like, I know what you were talking about with, you said the finance, that was that number one girl, she's getting $76,000 being the number one draft, and the NBA player is getting 13.7 million his first year. That's one of the things that we argue about, but it's not comparing apples to apples. And it's the same way sometimes, like I said, I think it was a blessing to have a disabled child in our family. It brought the whole family closer together. But yet, I wouldn't wish it on someone, but yet on the other hand, it's been truly a blessing. And sometimes in life, when the people that don't have connections to God, they don't understand, even today. You're still taking care of your mom? It's been over 4 years.
Didn't think that, did you?
If they were in my shoes, they would do the same, I would hope. But yeah, it's actually some of our worst times is gonna end up being our best times.
That's right.
Because it's gonna make you a better person and stronger. And sometimes it don't for people, and that's where we need to be there for them.
And it can bring a blessing to others. I'm gonna just mention this for a minute, like having handicapped children. And we do have some that are handicapped in the church. It not only blesses your family, it blesses the church family. Now, my kids don't know that some of them are handicapped. They don't understand that Michael, they know something is different, but they don't treat them like they're handicapped. Now, if they weren't around somebody like that handicapped, but I know some people who've never been around somebody are almost afraid to deal with somebody who, I have to sometimes explain to my kids, Michael has certain things like he can't always help every single, like they don't see it that way. And that's good for the heart. So the hardships can be a blessing. And here we're going to go through, and I'm going to mention these plagues. We're not going to read all the plagues. You got them written down right here. But I want you to see what they do represent and what God does and how God provides, okay, and what he actually is teaching. And this is not going good for the Egyptians. By the way, it doesn't really go for good for the Hebrews here at first. So he turns the water to blood. And the way they had to get water and everything, they're actually having now to try to figure out cisterns way down somewhere in a well somewhere, because all the water of the sea, the places where they normally go, think about also bathing and things like that, it's all blood, okay? They can't get good clean water. You can't live very long without good clean water. So it tells you they doing everything they can to get something to drink. And I put over here, this is actually information on the Egyptian gods, and you can actually study it. The Egyptians had a god that they believe was over the Nile, okay? Well, what did God do? Which God is more powerful? I want you to see what he's showing. He said, I'm going to show them who God is. It's not this God, the God of the Nile, because, water is imported. I can change it just like that. And by the way, Moses does it in front of the Egyptians, right? Frogs, okay, which pretty nasty all in your house, and they did get all in their house and everything. They actually have frogs are considered fertility. They had a god that related to fertility and renewal that had a frog shape, by the way. They believed that they were kind of a godly thing. He actually has these frogs like overtake their house. And you can't, their God is no God compared to the God they have. The lice here, okay, basically, again, a god of the earth and the dust. And this is actually interesting. He actually takes the dust and flings it up. They have a god of that. And it actually, instead of blessing, which they thought dust and dirt and all that, it actually gives them these things. And so they're eaten up by that. Flies, power over the Egyptian god. You can see Khepri here, god of creation and sun movement. Okay, which flies work off of that. There's actually a distinct relationship to all the gods of Egypt that they worship. And in every one of these cases, you believe in this God. Let me show you who God is. And just imagine all these things. And by the way, when he kills them off, they all just sit around like the frogs all die in their houses and all that. Nasty, messy. These flies are one of the most dangerous animals in the world. Okay, they say they're the most dangerous animal because they get on things that are nasty and spread diseases. And we have learned how to do certain things, but at this time they didn't know a lot of that the rules. So diseases would be spread. So a disease of cattle, what would that do to their livestock? Yeah, I mean they're going to have prosperity here is important, right? Got to think of the times and how important livestock was to them. And so this was dealing with protection. They had a goddess, Hathor, that was protecting, and they believed in cattle. By the way, interestingly enough, cattle are still considered gods by the Hindu people. The Hindu religion is basically the same religion here. It's changed a little bit, transition, but it's still pretty much, if you study it, they believe in literally many gods that you want to have. This is modern day idolatry, and they still believe cows are sacred, which is interesting because throughout the scriptures we read this. But then boils and sores, power of the Egyptian god Isis, medicine and peace. So they get diseases on them, boils all over their body, sores all over their body. At this point, you got the Egyptians basically saying, please get rid of these people. We're miserable. We're losing everything. Okay? Please stop this. Hail. This wasn't like any kind of hail, like little dots on the thing. The hail was big enough that it killed animals. If you were outside, you're going to die. And actually, at this point, God is basically tells them, okay, we'll tell what's going to happen. And the Hebrew people, that they actually could take in their livestock here and protect them. And if you read the passage here, some choose not to, especially the Egyptians, like that. No big deal. Because again, they're worshiping these foreign gods. There's a god of the sky that they hear. One of the Egyptian goddesses is the god of the sky. Guess what this hail does? It kills all the animals that are left out, and they left most of their animals at this time of year out. Because the disease didn't get them. The hail was going to get them, right? Not to mention, what does it do to the crops? I mean, you're talking large, enough to kill a person. There's not going to be any crops, okay? They just destroyed the crops, which, by the way, if you thought you could go out and take the grain and still make it work, okay, locusts is next. What do locusts do? Destroy everything. They come in these swarms, okay? They're going to eat up everything that you couldn't get out. So what's going to happen to your food supply? It's going to be pretty bad. And again, a god of destruction and disorder. They believed in Seth there. Darkness, this was the sun god, which is actually one of their chief gods. They worshiped the sun, Ra, okay? And they believed in this, the god of the sun. Wouldn't it be interesting? We had a clip, so we know exactly how that works. We know it wasn't that way. It went darkness where they couldn't see in front of their face on in the daylight. The sun's blocked out. They're standing there. They can't see in front of their own face. You know, right in front of somebody, right in front of their face there. They can't see. They don't have lights. And the lights, it said, actually read, the lights wouldn't even stay lit. It tells you. It's darkness. Okay, they're like blind people walking around. And so it's interesting, he actually takes all these gods that they're worshiping and shows, compared to their gods, they're not even God. And see, Pharaoh was honored as almost like a god. I mentioned this because what's the last one here?
Death of the firstborn.
Death of the firstborn. All firstborn. This is the one that actually works. This is what God says. I'll give you one more plague and he will let it go this time. Okay. Who is God and what's going to be important? Pharaoh's going to lose his firstborn. At that point, it's all done. Now, this looks like a horrible devastation that affects all kinds of people. And by the way, by the end, you do have Egyptians saying, let them go. That's truly a God. There's a respect and there's honor. You're going to see that in just a minute in the next chapter 12 here. Okay. But they're actually having a respect for God. And what would this do to Moses' ability and relationship to the Hebrews? They might not love everything they see, but the last part they definitely loved when the Egyptians were getting, they weren't, right?
I think they're gonna believe him.
There's gonna be a belief, there's something powerful happening. Moses is like God, even though he's not God. But I wanna think about, not only is God providing, okay, God does all of this to actually bless the people. And I guarantee at the time, they didn't think this sounded like a blessing. As soon as that, all of our water is blood, there's frogs coming to their houses, and all those happened to the Hebrews too. We're going through this devastation. I'm sure they didn't think this was part of the plan of God to bless them. And yet God actually uses it to prove who he is and to bless them. So they'd see Moses a little different. And there is a relationship, and we're going to get into this in the coming weeks, between God and Moses. But the fact that he let Moses be a representative like that for them, that he's going to be the leader, that he's going to have a special relation, and it's going to grow. Down the line, we're going to see even a closer fellowship that he has with them. But it's not just to him. What about his relationship, God's relationship to his people? This is all for them. They're grumblers, they're complainers, and they're not going to stop doing that, by the way. They're just going to get worse. And yet his covenant is remembered, and there's a special relationship he has with them, a fellowship that is continued. When the New Testament talks about we having fellowship with God or with Christ and with one another, there's a relationship as his children that was understood by these people as well. So when I think about, again, all this, you might ask the question, why is Moses chosen for this task? What's special about him? Why did God choose Moses? Is it really just because he grew up in the place? Is it really because he's a shepherd?
I think he was chosen from birth because he protected them.
Partly, yeah. Can Moses actually refuse God? He could, okay? In fact, we just go to a passage where it said God almost put Moses to death over something. It's a really weird passage, and I didn't feel like talking about it. But the reality is Moses can reject God. He has the ability. I really think, when you think about it, there has to be something special with Moses. There's something God saw in Moses. There's something God loved in Moses. And I don't think Moses had every ability or every talent. He has an anger problem. He has other challenges he faced. He obviously makes excuses, okay, and he's good at that. But there's something about this fellowship. And it goes a lot to how Moses is living. I think it's a lot that the relationship that is growing among him and God as well. And maybe even the fact that Moses kept a relationship. Remember, he chose the Hebrews over his own heritage at one time.
After he left, because he killed us and went away and shepherded for 40 years, he basically was separated from his people. It might have brought him closer to God. He never forgot God. I mean, he probably looked at it as a blessing to grow up like he did with.
And I would say that's the case. Even when he sees the burning bush,
Yeah.
he turns to see what's going on with it, why it's not burning. He does walk in the holy ground. He does have that. There is something special. There is something special. You had something, okay?
Yeah, it seems like all the great ones, you know, you look back at, you know, Abraham and Moses and Elijah, Elisha, Isaiah, Jeremiah, you know, Apostle Paul, and all the other apostles. It just seems like, you know, it mentions before that some of them were chose before birth. And it makes sense because I think God chose those type of people before they were born because he knew they would stay the course their whole life. He knew they would never turn back. And for people with such great purposes like what Moses accomplished through the Lord's power, you can't have somebody do all that and then fall away at the end. It just, you know, it doesn't look right. God picked people that he knew would never relent. We don't know that, but he does.
That's true. And I think about the separation here, even of Moses. He picks Moses out, and Aaron as well. Aaron becomes, obviously, the first high priest in his lineage. There's a special relationship with him, but all of Israel, when I really think about the separation, even on the plagues, when he finally separates them, the Hebrews from the others, there's a proof of showing the righteous from the unrighteous, the blessings of God. and being given them. I want to read one more section, chapter 12, and then we'll close up, because I want you to see, they do get out, they send them out, Pharaoh gets tired, but basically boots them out. This is how much changed within this time. And God told Moses this was what's going to happen. And I'm sure Moses thinking, okay, we'll see if that happens. Now the Lord said to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, verse 2, this month shall be in the beginning of months for you. It goes on here, it says, beginning of the first month of the year to you. Speak to all the congregation of Israel, saying, on the 10th of the month, they are each one to take a lamb for themselves according to the father's household, a lamb for each household. The household is too small for a lamb, that he and his neighbor nearest his house are to take one according to the number of persons in them, in proportion to which the one should eat. You are to divide the lamb. Your lamb shall be an unblemished male, a year old. You take it from the sheep of the goats, or from the goats. You shall keep it until the 14th day of the same month. The whole assembly of the congregation of Israel is to slaughter it at twilight. Moreover, they shall take some of the blood and put it on the two doorposts, on the lintel, the houses in which they eat it. They shall eat the flesh that same night, roasted with fire, and they shall eat it with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. Do not eat any of it raw, or boiled it all with water, but rather roast with fire, both its head and its legs along with its entrails. And you shall not leave any of it until morning, but whatever is left of it until morning you shall completely burn with fire. Now you shall eat it in this way, with your garment belted around your waist, your sandals on your feet, staff in your hand. You shall eat it in a hurry. It is the Lord's Passover. The Passover is the Spirit. Very interesting here. I think every one of those details are very important. God gives us a special command. But go on here, because I want you to see what's going to happen. For I will go through the land of Egypt that night, strike all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the human firstborns to animals, against all the gods of Israel. Gods of Egypt. I will execute judgments. Now, did you hear what he just said? Against all the gods of Egypt, I will execute judgment, for I am the Lord. Okay, so he's going to strike. He's struck all the gods, and this is his final blow to the gods. Okay, that even death itself can be. And they basically have this bread. Okay, they take the Passover. The Passover still today by Jews are celebrated. And verse 33. So it came midnight, it all happened. First one died. Said the Egyptians urged the people to send them out of the land in a hurry. So they said, we will all be dead. So the people took their dough before it was leavened, with their kneading bowls bound up in the clothes of their shoulders. And the sons of Israel had done according to the word of Moses, for they had requested from the Egyptians articles of silver, articles of gold, clothing, and the Lord had given the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, so that they let them have their request. Therefore they plundered the Egyptians. And sons of Israel journeyed, and goes on to tell you where they're going to journey. What takes place at the end here? You realize what's changed? The Egyptians actually give them money to leave. Like, you can take our gold or silver, our clothes. Okay, how is this going to help Israel? Well, they're about to go on a 40-year wandering, okay, so it's going to help them a lot. They're going to need everything they get, okay. It says they plundered them, but it says they were given favor in the sights of the Egyptians. Why do you think there was some favorable? For one, they wanted to get them out of there, I'm sure, okay.
They recognize there's one God.
Egypt changed. They knew there was a God of the Hebrews. They knew there was a God, different than their gods. They recognized the difference in what had taken place. And so they gave them gold, silver, clothes, whatever they want. Take what you want to get. And these people walked out with treasures. And they're going to need them as they go forward. I want you to see it. God, even in this point, is providing. Because God can see a bigger future. He actually did gave them. They might have went out. God can take care of them. They're going to need things when they get out there. But God has prepared to hold all of this for them. And there's a relationship he has with them. When I think about this, when we close here, what kind of relationship that we need with God? I want you to think, do we trust our God that way? Do we have that fellowship with him? Do we have an understanding when we're going through all these things? And if we do, that's great. How can we develop a closer relationship? How can we get closer to God? How can we trust him more? How can we see the bigger picture even when we really can't see the picture? And I don't think Moses saw the big picture. I still don't think he thinks he's going to wander in the wilderness 40 years. He's hoping he gets them there and gets what he's promised. And things don't always go the way you want them. And all this is a part of God's plan. And so maybe we think about that. Next week, we're going to look at the second part with the wandering in the wilderness and how God not only provides, but I want you to see this. I told you I was going to bring you back to the special relationship Moses has with God and how different it is, even among the people, how they are to honor him, even when sometimes they don't. Okay, how God builds this relationship, this fellowship with Moses. It's very unique. And we today can have fellowship with God through his son, Jesus Christ. Thank God. Any comments? Thoughts, comments? Okay, this close in a word of prayer. Brian, will you lead us in close prayer?
Yeah. God, we thank you for the time we had here to look closer into your word and to think about Moses and his relationship with you and think about ourselves and our relationship. God, we just ask for your wisdom and guidance while we leave here. Pray for the courage to share you with those around us, those who've